Blue Beetle Battalion, rise up once again. The movie has now officially hit theaters. And with the movie now out to the public, it is time for us to dive into full spoilers for Blue Beetle. So that's exactly what I'll be doing here for you guys, giving you my reaction to Blue Beetle, pointing out some Easter eggs you might have missed, little hints to the larger DC universe that James Gunn is moving forward with now that he's confirmed this Blue Beetle will return for his universe. But again, it's not just going to be about my opinion. Now that you guys are starting to watch Blue Beetle, genuinely, what did you think about the movie? Were you surprised by it? Were you like, I don't get the hype or why people are enjoying it? Good or positive? I'd love to know your honest opinions down below. But first, I want to thank the awesome sponsor of today's video, Jarritos. This summer, we might have gotten a record high heat, but Jarritos is ensuring you're gonna stay refreshed all year long. Coming in a variety of 12 different flavors, anywhere from strawberry, mango, mandarin, grapefruit, my personal favorite, lime. Jarritos come in glass bottles made with real sugar, no high fructose corn syrup, along with all natural flavors. If you use the link in my description, you could be pointed to where you could find a 12-pack of Jarritos near you, most of the time found in your local Walmart. That's where I stock up on it. So again, please click the link in my description and support Jarritos, because supporting them also means you're supporting me. Thank you again to Jarritos for sponsoring today's video. So just to reiterate my thoughts before we go into specifics on the movie, I really enjoyed it. I came out loving the film. Yes, I'll have a bias towards it because I grew up in a Mexican household and this movie was just gear built towards reminding me of all that. Like genuinely, I feel like I could do an Easter egg video of Hispanic references to things I grew up with, from like the grandma asking por la bendición. At one point they wake up Jaime using Vaporru. Even in some press screens of Blue Beetle, they gave out vapor sticks, and that's because it's like a miracle cure in Hispanic households. We use that for everything. Framed photos of La Santa Maria all over your house. They had Don Francisco on the TV. Can't forget El Chapulín Colorado being thrown in here. That and like a dozen other things. The Latino family dynamic in here I thought really worked and served as the heart of the film. Jaime Reyes, played by Solo Maridueña, knocked it out of the park. I thought he really shined as this character. I really hope he's given the chance to get a sequel, and if that's not going to be the case due to the poor box office that we just have to accept, I hope whatever supporting roles he might play in future DCU projects get a lot of screen time. And although the movie did feel very much at times like 10 other comic book movies we've seen over the years, I felt like there was still enough charm and enjoyment in it that I could put aside a lot of the similarities that we've seen in other adapted comic book movies. I still think it was so badass, specifically when it came to like the hand-to-hand fight scenes, the abilities this Blue Beetle has. Really just a blast of a movie, and I'm glad others are also finding enjoyment and coming out surprised with it. So now getting into specifics of the movie, from the very beginning, they bust out some huge Easter eggs and references to the larger Blue Beetle world. Alright, so from the opening of the movie, we catch up with Susan Sarandon's character that is on the hunt for the Blue Beetle Scarab. This is Victoria Cord, the sister of Ted Cord, the second Blue Beetle, that we got so much to talk about in this spoiler review, because I was not expecting Ted Cord to be such a large shadow over this movie. But putting that aside for a second, once they find the scarab, we transition into a title card sequence where we get an idea of how the scarab came to Earth. We get this shot in space where the scarab is just flying through asteroids and whatnot, but I'm seeing a lot of people miss the giant Easter egg in here, the other colored scarabs. It wasn't just the Blue Beetle scarab being thrown out to our Earth. We had other colored scarabs that could play a large part in the future of Blue Beetle. We had a yellow one, a purple one, a green one. And in the Blue Beetle comics, this has recently become kind of a big thing that they're wanting to explore. If you've read the latest Blue Beetle run called Graduation Day, which I do recommend it, it's a fun read. In that comic, we explore other Blue Beetles that are on Earth and that maybe face off a little bit with Jaime Reyes before they work together. We have a yellow beetle named Dynastis that was given to an El Salvador teacher. She doesn't really seem to have the same abilities as Blue Beetle, being able to conjure up different weapons, but she is physically stronger than Jaime Reyes. They also introduced a green beetle that also comes with their own different abilities. This one is able to contort their body and be a little bit more elastic, and also being able to change their size, getting really large. But the reason I bring this up is because, again, if you watch that opening sequence, when the scarab is shooting towards Earth, it does collide with the green beetle, and it kind of electrocutes itself, almost looking like the scarab malfunctions. And I feel like that was an important detail that they threw threw off right away because the Blue Beetle scarab comes from an alien race known as the Reach. And the Reach created these scarabs and send them out to different worlds for when they're ready to conquer them. They land on the planet, they attach to a host, and whenever the Reach is ready to go after that planet, they'll activate that Blue Beetle to be a weapon of mass destruction to prepare that planet for their invasion. In some adaptations, it's usually explained that Jaime's Blue Beetle scarab malfunctioned a little or went haywire, and that's why it never fully goes evil on Jaime Reyes. So again, I thought it was crazy that right off the bat, within like the first 3 minutes, they have crazy Blue Beetle lore thrown at your face. Who knows if that'll ever come into play or they'll actually introduce other beetles into the world. Because the green and yellow beetle aren't the only one. If you've watched Young Justice, you know there's a black beetle that was kind of badass. It'd be awesome if they introduced their own scarab war and have a bunch of different beetles going after Jaime. But again, putting that aside, the Easter eggs continue. Once that scarab lands on Earth, we start to see newspaper clippings from outlets like the Daily Planet, where Superman works, where we get headlines of Dan Garrett finding the scarab, the first Blue Beetle, an archaeologist, where the scarab was found in the Mayan ruins in Mexico, which I think is a great touch in here just to keep the Latino culture going. We even get to see people back then being able to have the scarab attached to them. So there was Blue Beetles way before Dan Garrett that got to have the scarab attached to them. We also see newspaper clippings of Ted Kord being the Blue Beetle and coming out of his Blue Beetle bug ship just like in the comics, eventually bringing us to present day where Jaime Reyes is returning home after graduating from college, Palomera City, with some nice Hispanic music in the background. Now again, to Blue Beetle fans, this was kind of a topic of discussion here because in the comics, Blue Beetle comes from El Paso, Texas. And in El Paso, Texas, there's a lot of Hispanic culture in there, and some people were upset that they changed that for the movie. But in the movie, they do show that Jaime lives on El Paso Street, so they still tried paying some love to El Paso, Texas. But I gotta admit, I love that they created this fictional city just for Blue Beetle because this was created just for the movie, and now the comics are starting to incorporate it where Blue Beetle lives in Palomera City. And this essentially will be Blue Beetle's home, just like Metropolis for Superman, Gotham for Batman, Central City for the Flash. I really love that about DC, that they have their own fictional cities and it feels like they live on a completely separate Earth. Marvel can do the thing where heroes live in New York, in, Miami, San Francisco. I love that DC creates their own fictional cities. I feel like it's what's always made it feel a little special. Plus, Palomera City looks like a good mixture of a lot of different Latin cultures. Although Jaime Reyes and his family in here are Mexican, the director of the movie, Angel Manuel Soto, is Puerto Rican, and you could also feel a lot of Puerto Rican and other Hispanic cultures being meshed into this one city. And then here's where I gotta be honest, where the movie kind of dragged a little bit for the first hour, but for good reason. We're setting up the characters and the world. I mean, Jaime finds out, his dad suffered from a heart attack, that they're losing money, they're about to lose the house. He thinks he's gonna be able to fix things because he's graduated from college, has a degree, but ends up working as a cleaner at this country club, not something he really thought he'd be doing with his pre-law degree. It's not stuff I'm saying was bad, but in the first 40 minutes, I was kind of like, man, okay, I hope they pick up the pace a little bit. And yeah, once Blue Beetle comes in contact with Jenny Kord, the daughter of Ted Kord, and he gets the scarab and goes through that awesome sequence of body horror that is inspired from the comics. If you read the panels of Blue Beetle, every time he transforms in and out of the suit, characters around him witnessing it say it looks horrific and nasty. And I also loved that every time he went into the suit, he just lost his clothes. It all burned off, and once the suit was off, he was just naked. Any other superhero movie halfway into the film would have come up with some BS. Oh, I created this nylon fabric that is heat resistant, and if you wear it under your clothes, you won't be naked. We go the whole movie and that problem is never solved. Every time Blue Beetle transforms, loses them J's, loses them nice shirts, the boy's just naked. I kind of like that they didn't try to address every problem of being the Blue Beetle. But now let's focus in on the Ted Kord aspect and the previous Blue Beetles that were a large part of this movie. So I guess I should have known they were going to mention Ted Kord a lot, but I really thought it was just going to be offhand mentions, simple little sentences here and there. I didn't think the movie was going to make it like 100% clear to you that like Jaime is like the third Blue Beetle, okay? There's been others before him. And I actually really like that because I feel like it shows some respects to the Blue Beetle fans that like the previous versions. And the way they kind of did this was us having the relationship be seen through Jenny Kord, the daughter of Ted Kord, that gets a really nice emotional scene where she breaks down about how hard her life is being the daughter of a superhero. She mentioned she had a happy family, everything was good, but her mother died when she was 6, and that's where her dad kind of lost his way and started disappearing weeks at a time until one day he just disappeared and never came back, which is why Victoria Cord is now the head at Cord Industries. Now, a couple of things with that. When she's breaking down and talking about this, we do get to see a painting on the wall where Ted Kord's face is kind of blurred, but if you've been following online with the internet rumors, you know at one point it was said that Jason Sudeikis was actually cast as Ted Kord for the movie, and then people dismissed that, and if you see the film, even the post-credit scene, they don't really show us who Ted Kord is. But that painting on the wall, although it's a little blurred, it looks just like Jason Sudeikis, who I think would be great as the Blue Beetle in here, especially with the version they set up in this movie. Because when we go to Ted Kord's mansion and George Lopez is there, which, hey, by the way, I loved how much George Lopez was included into the movie. He definitely brought a lot of funny parts to the film. But when they get to Ted Kord's basement and he finds out, whoa, Ted Kord was the Blue Beetle? That was some cool DCU world building. Jaime comes into the lab and goes, who's Blue Beetle? And George Lopez's character is like, oh man, you were just a kid, but he was like a fun superhero. He was the hero of Palmera City. He even elaborates and goes, yeah, Blue Beetle was to Palmera City like Superman to Metropolis or the Flash to Central City, referencing those heroes existing in this world, but being so vague that it's not like, oh, that was definitely a Man of Steel reference, or oh, that was definitely an Ezra Miller Flash reference. It's just, that was a reference to blank hero. Anybody could be playing them. But in those moments, George Lopez mentions that he always liked the Blue Beetle, that he thought he was pretty cool, that he thought he had a sense of humor. He's even honest at one point and says he wasn't as good as these other heroes though. And they explore that in the movie, because although they mentioned the first Blue Beetle, Dan Garrett, his mentor, did have the scarab attached to him, when the scarab was passed down to Ted Kord, he couldn't get it to unlock or attach to him, because they establish in this movie that the scarab chooses its host. In other adaptations, Ted Kord just refuses to have the scarab attached to him because he thinks it's a little dangerous or weird to have an alien kind of take over his body. So instead, he would just use the tech and energy of the Beetle to make his own crime-fighting weapons. And I loved all the little gadgets we got to see, from like the little shields, the big fist guns that the family gets to use, and of course, his Blue Beetle bug ship. I was not expecting them to use that so much in the movie. There's a scene in the movie where the Reyes family goes to save Jaime, and they're in the Blue Beetle ship, and we get to see all the gadgets he attached, like a Blue Beetle fart mist. Pairing that up with another scene in the movie where Jenny Kord is chewing gum, throws it, and it bubbles up into like this foam. That's a good showcase of what George Lopez meant, that the Blue Beetle was a hero with a sense of humor. He had gadgets that were kind of funny, maybe malfunctioned a little, but at the end of the day, he was getting the job done. Having Kord be such a large shadow of the movie really makes me excited or wanting to see him in the future, but I'll elaborate more once we get to the post-credit scene side of things, because that's Ted Kord related here. Now, I did think the villain side of things was like the weakest part of the Blue Beetle movie. It's just, Susan Sarandon is a great actress, but just being evil kind of for the sake of evil. Like the origin story they gave her is that like she was heavily involved with Cord Industries when she was younger, but because she was a woman, their grandfather didn't trust her with the company, and instead they gave it to Ted Kord. And this version of Ted Kord that they're building up, although still brilliant because he can make all these high-tech gadgets, he seems to be a bit of a goof, or not taking the tech world as seriously, because you see some of the goofy things he does with it. So Victoria Cord has always envied her brother and was happy he disappeared so that she could take over, and wants to build her own versions of the Blue Beetle scarab called the OMAC that she'll attach to the back of soldiers and create an army and whatnot. I was like, okay, I guess that's fine. The most interesting part to me was like Carpax's backstory. The scarab linked up with Carpax and shows Jaime how he grew up, that he was just a kid in a foreign country and was enlisted in this war, basically kidnapped and forced to do all this stuff, losing his family, losing his sense of way, and being controlled. It was honestly pretty heartbreaking, and I thought a little different for them to do. There are moments of his backstory that feel a lot like what Iron Man was trying to set up, where Tony Stark realizes that the weapons he's creating are affecting people in other countries and being used against them, like down to a shot of a missile saying Cord Industries, just like you would see a missile that says Stark Industries. So I definitely understand the people that are complaining, saying I've seen all these different tropes in other comic book movies already, but that didn't stop me from loving all the fight and action scenes in here, because I thought they were a lot of fun, not just visually, but the choreography. Like the effects on the suit and all that I thought looked great, the repulsive guns, the swords coming out of him, All of that tech was awesome. The director mentioned they took a lot of inspiration from combos and fights from the Injustice 2 game where Blue Beetle would fight there. And yeah, you can see some of that inspiration in here. I just had a big smile every time Jaime was taking down a bunch of goons. The only part of the tech I do think I wish they explored better, or maybe they fleshed out more, is the relationship between Jaime and the Scarab, because in the comics it's a little bit more complicated. Yes, they have that back and forth of like Jaime wants to do something but the Scarab takes over, or vice versa, Jaime wants the Scarab out and it doesn't come out. The Scarab in the comics has a lot more of a personality, and here it just felt extremely robotic, extremely monotone. Hopefully if we get to see more of him, they explore that relationship out a little bit better, because again, I think by the end of the movie they barely scratched the surface of what this Blue Beetle can do and where it comes from. Now I do want to get to the part of the movie that had me teary-eyed and almost just shedding a tear in the theater here. Because they set up the family dynamics so well in this movie, when it came time for the scene where Victoria Cord goes after Jaime's family and he's like far away racing to go after them and all these people are pointing guns, like that was just such a powerful scene, and it was done so heartbreaking because Jaime is doing his best to fight and protect his family, and they get the upper hand on him, and then the dad has a heart attack. And because they built that relationship so well, and you know the connection between this family and the sister and all that, when the dad dies, it was sad. It was so heartbreaking. They elaborate further on it later in the movie where like Jaime is in this like dream state where he's talking to his ghost dad, which I think the visual effects there could have been a little bit better, but you know, the heart and emotional stuff in that scene really worked for me. Like even me now just kind of talking about it makes me swell up a little bit, but genuinely just beautiful stuff I'm glad was included in there, and it helps the movie go a long way from just feeling generic. If you can actually make me emotionally attached to these characters and get me feeling a little sad when things like that happen, you did something right. And I think it was because of those emotional stakes and attachment to the character that like the third act, when they're just fighting, it reminded me a lot of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, okay? And I mean this as a compliment. At the ending battle, you know, where you have Tobey half-masked, bleeding, all worn down, fighting the Goblin, the intensity like that was just like at the end of Blue Beetle. They even do the half-mask thing. At one point, he thinks Carpax kills George Lopez, and he goes like freaking Super Saiyan, all lightninged up, floating, and then just explodes out. Those fight scenes were awesome. Like, I genuinely am gonna go watch the movie again in IMAX just to see those scenes go down. But okay, getting to the first two post-credit scenes, I want to talk about the very last one first, because it was more of an inside joke in reference to Mexican Hispanic culture, because it was a little stop-motion play on El Chapulín Colorado. If you grew up at all with Hispanic parents, you most likely saw El Chavo or Chispirito on the TV. This is essentially our Mexican superhero that we've seen on TV. The man's even made it to Fortnite. It's just a funny, iconic character that now generations of Hispanic families have kind of grown up with or have seen. And so with us finally getting a Latino superhero live action as the star, I thought it was so awesome that they paid homage to El Chapulín Colorado. It definitely got me smiling about that. So that was just a nice little inside reference for the culture and whatnot. But now getting on to the mid-credit scene. In the mid-credit scene, it's revealed that Ted Kord is still alive. He's sending a message through his computer trying to contact his daughter saying, I'm still out there, I'm alive. And we zoom in on the Ted Kord suit letting us know which version of the Blue Beetle it is. And let me tell you, that kind of got me hyped. That got me excited. Because the movie did such a good job of like showing you what Ted Kord was, not only like as a father, as an inventor, as a superhero. The shadow was so huge, it made you so intrigued with the character that even if I think you were someone that knew nothing about Blue Beetle lore or even the different versions of the Blue Beetle, that little tease kind of made you want to go, oh, I hope they make another one. I'd love to see that version of the Blue Beetle come in contact now with Jaime, how they would interact with each other, what he would think of the relationship with the daughter, or even just the daughter talking to her dad, being like, why do you disappear on me? Where do you go? And because this post-credit scene was approved by James Gunn, where he's been deleting other post-credit scenes to other DCU movies, don't forget The Flash was supposed to end with Henry Cavill, Sasha Calle, and Michael Keaton as Batman, showcasing future plans, but he deleted all that for a funny little gag involving George Clooney. So that means if James Gunn approved this post-credit scene, it's because he thinks he can keep true to that promise and show us a Ted Kord, whether it is Jason Sudeikis or maybe James Gunn would like to cast somebody else to play him. I think the number one place we'll get that answer is probably in the Max Booster Gold series that is coming to streaming. That was one of the announcements made when James Gunn came up and revealed his slate for the DCU. Booster Gold is a character that has a lot of heavy ties to Blue Beetle, has teamed up a lot with Ted Kord. And remember, the origin story of Booster Gold is that he's a person from the future that takes future tech, comes back to our time, and uses all that future tech to look like a superhero. He's a wannabe superhero. James Gunn called him a superhero with imposter syndrome. He does it for the fame, celebrity, and attention, but at the end of the day, he's kind of got a good heart. Whenever the movie started hinting that Ted Kord had disappeared, I automatically started thinking, oh, he's with Booster Gold. They got lost in time somewhere. They're stuck on a mission. So I kind of really hope the Booster Gold series plays into where Ted Kord has been and maybe their relationship. Heck, even with the setup that George Lopez mentioned that Ted Kord was a hero all the way back maybe like in the 80s or 90s, they could do an early flashback movie to a JSA film, the Just Society of America, see some of the early members on there to what the JSA looks like now in present day, because I'm pretty sure Superman Legacy is introducing Just Society of America members with people like Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific. Those are all people that have been part of the JSA in the comics. So I don't know, you can kind of see where the dots might connect and what James Gunn could do here. All that's really left now is, when does Jaime Reyes show up next? Because again, I hate to say it, it looks like his movie's gonna flop. It's not gonna make that much money. There's a good chance it could have legs and be profitable, but we gotta be honest with ourselves, it doesn't look like that'll happen. So the next time we see Jaime might be in a team-up project, you know? He might show up in the Booster Gold series or in a JSA movie. I'm hoping like a Teen Titans film. It'd be really awesome to see Jaime be part of the Titans. I'm still very happy with the movie. I'm gonna go watch it again. Heck, I've already pre-ordered the Steelbook because I really enjoyed the movie. I toss it off to you guys. You've seen Blue Beetle, you've heard me rambling. What did you enjoy? What didn't you enjoy? All your thoughts, theories, let me know down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.